G'day guys, welcome to the round 24 preview of Footy Rants. I'm Benny Matthews, and we're going to waste any time. I'm super excited for this week. You know, we're getting closer and closer to finals footy now, and I say it every week. Every game starts to influence where teams are going to finish, not only whether they make the top 8 or whether they're in the top 4 or whereabouts they placed inside the top 8. So there's only one game that involves the Rabbitohs yet again that pretty well doesn't affect what happens with inside that top 8. So, you know, plenty of exciting games on for this weekend. So without any further ado, tonight we have the Parramatta Eels up against the Gold Coast Titans. So we have Parramatta with everything to gain, Titans with nothing to lose. Big setback now, big news coming out. Jared Hayne is out for the Titans. So after an embroiled week with, scandals with Coach Neil Henry and himself having their feud and who's going to come off second best in that exchange, and you know everything's sort of up in the air at the moment, and it could very well be both of them. Reading in the Courier Mail today that if Hayne is to depart, he'll be expecting every single cent of his $1.2 million, which will pay him out for that third and final year on his contract. So that's a big factor, when you've got a club like the Titans financially. But yeah, pushing those things aside and focusing on the game itself, without Jared Hayne, you've got to pay the due respects. And a big plus we see here on screen, Bevan French returns for Parramatta. And I think what that does, it just creates a little bit of certainty, even though it was Clint Gutherson that was playing there and Bevan French was on the wing when everything was firing on all cylinders. I think even just having Bevan French there just allows Corey Norman and Mitchell Moses to really hone in on what it is their roles and responsibilities are. It alleviates any sort of, not that Will Smith played terrible, but, just situationally, he just didn't bring as much spark as a Bevan French or a Clint Gutherson. Ended up coming up with a bit of a 50-50 call, which saw him defensively make a decision that cost him 10 minutes in the sin bin, and subsequently, the Newcastle Knights scored during that, and that's what basically catapulted the Knights to victory in the end. Everything outside of that is unchanged, so we see. So Cameron King is still placed at 9. So just quickly running through that. So Bevan French, Radradra, Jennings, Takarangi, Ava'a, Norman, Moses, Vave, King, Mana, Mau, Maroa, Brown, Alvaro, Edwards, Matangi, and Terapo. So, it's a 17 that's pretty well been getting the job done week in, week out, with the addition of a Bevan French now. So Will Smith drops out of that. He just goes back to the reserves bench. And we see a young kid in Philip Sammy come onto the fullback position. I did a little bit of research on young Philip, and he's a Springfield junior, so out Ipswich way. I'm imagining it's Springfield, Queensland, and came through the East Tigers Mal Meninga system before heading down to the Gold Coast. So a bit of an interesting story, I guess. We see. When you're a part of that East program, that's a Melbourne Storm feeder. So, the Gold Coast Titans obviously seen something to snatch him out of that program, and he's only a 20-year-old, so plenty of work for him to do moving forward. Otherwise, we see the backline remains unchanged, with the exception of Tyrone Roberts coming into the starting side at 6, and LG with that sternum trouble. He still will take part in the game, at least as far as we know at this stage, and he's number 14, so he'll come off the bench. And just a big wrap to see there in the reserves, a little bit biased there. We see Benny Knack named to number 19 in the reserves. I was fortunate enough to have a bit of time with Benny when I was coaching at the Melbourne Storm 20s last year, and he's a monumental leader. He's had his opportunities playing for Fiji in a couple of test matches now, and he's definitely a young, bright kid on the up and up. He's got plenty between the ears as well. He's not just a kid who's heavily dependent on football. He's got a lot of shit going for him off the field as well, doing his ex-science degree and whatnot. So, it's good to see him, rewarded and say, hey, mate, you're thereabouts. You look at some of the forwards that are running around there, Jarrett Wallace, James Proctor, he's in good company. So I think good things, big things are only just around the corner. But with respect to looking at the game itself, the fact that the top 4 spot is so crucial for Parramatta and the result hinges on that. They really need to be putting away teams that are outside the 8, which they failed to do last week, and I highly doubt that they'll do that 2 weeks in a row. And without Jared Hayne, I think not that he's really been bringing too much, but I just think that added pressure now of key players out is going to weigh a little bit too much, and I think we'll see Norman and Moses get back to where they were, at that better part of their win streak. So yeah, I'm tipping the Eels to do it and do it quite comfortably. So yeah, it's Eels 13 plus for me. Second game, so we move to Friday night, Rabbitohs versus the Warriors. So as I alluded to earlier, this is a game which completely is unaffected as with respect to the final. So you've got 11th versus 12th. You're basically fighting to see who can finish as high up the ladder by season's end as possible. We scroll down to the starting side, so pretty much unchanged with respect to the Rabbitohs. The only differences here, we see Burgess shuffled into the front row. Cameron Murray comes into that lock position, and Zane Musgrove goes back to the bench. So Burgess brothers up front in Tom and Sam. Then you got your back rows are still the same in Sutton and Crichton, and in Cam Murray, as I said, in lock. That spine of Johnson, Walker, Reynolds, and Damien Cook has been working really, really well. And I think just based off that sheer confidence and the lack thereof in the Warriors camp, it is going to be a big difference here. I expect the Rabbitohs to go and win comfortably. We see some of the changes here for the Warriors. That Ada Hingano, after a strong display last week in a thoroughly outclassed performance last hit out against the Raiders, remains at 7. So Mason Lenore has been dropped. He's 18th man. And outside of that, Charlie Gubb comes into the 17. Love Charlie. He's a cult hero over there, and much as he was, and his brother is at Wynnum, Peter. So shout out to Pete. I just love everything that Charlie brings to the table. I would love to actually know some of the rationale behind whether it's form or just whether coaches are entitled to judge part of their picking on just how they value the person as well. If you don't really get along with a person, you're going to find it hard to pick him in your 17 week to week. So you see there he's only played 8 games of the season, which is a little interesting. But there's a few stats here that don't really bear too well for the Warriors. We know they've only had 1 win in Australia this year. These two sides have only come together 3 times since 2013. The Bunnies have won the last 5. First time that they've played in Australia since 2011. So not too many things going in the Warriors' favour, even though it has stretched out over a vast period of time. And if you're looking for a little bit of value, we know Alex Johnson's been red hot. He's leading try scorer. He's scored 4 tries in his last 3 games. It's hard to see the Bunnies winning well without him not crossing the white line. So Johnson to score, Bunnies 13 plus, $3.10. Pretty healthy value there, especially with some of the experience that they're lacking in the halves, minus Johnson. Obviously, Kieran Foran's a big plus back in this week, but outside of that, I think Roger Tuivasa-Sheck was forced to be way over involved, especially in a team that did end up getting flogged by 20 points anyway. And unless Hoffman can sort of clean up defensively and just build some sort of confidence back in this side for the last few games, there's not much to look forward to for a Warriors fan outside of that if they can't get that done. So if not for themselves, for the fans. But yeah, I think the Bunnies will just pretty much like they did at the back end of last year, missed out on the finals but won their last 4, and looks like we're in for something pretty similar. Second game, I'm really looking forward to this game, and that's come from someone who's not a massive Broncos supporter, but I just think the way that this is shaped for both sides, the Broncos have sort of set a precedent now that, hey, we are genuine title contenders. Whilst we had that little blip against Para a few weeks back, we've put every other team to the sword. We're playing in that unorthodox style. Everyone sort of doubts this lineup of our spine, as I still do. I'm still not sure if, Nicarima Milford is the way forward. Is his Hunt the way forward at 9? But they're getting results. So, I'm the one who looks like a dickhead every week when I say that it's not necessarily the best format to run with, but they keep getting results nevertheless. Speaking of Ben Hunt, there was reports earlier in the week he left the training session after contact that it was either the forearm, they were just clearing for some fractures, but I haven't heard anything different. Benji Marshall has still been named in an extended bench. And we hear news this week that he will move back to his first club in the West Tigers next year. Turned down a $100,000 1-year extension from the Bronx. But yeah, so he's still in the reserves list. Otherwise, the team remains unchanged from last week. So it'll be interesting to see whether Friday does start at 9 again. You would suspect that'd be the case. And then, yeah, the three blokes that I gave a rap to earlier in the week in Pango Jr., Arrow and Herman Assesi get their nod off the bench again after strong performances. So some selection headaches for McGregor. I guess that is a good thing to a certain degree. We see that Ewan Aitken's been named in the reserves list. So, it's been mixed results for the Dragons. So I'm not sure what sense of loyalty McGregor will feel he owes to anyone in the back line as far as picking them again. I think Matt Duffy's been really good at one, especially in his ball playing responsibilities in getting outside his defenders to create space for his centres and wingers. So in that respect, I think he does a far better job than what Dugan does at one. But then at the same time, you'd probably say, just based off reputation, that you're going to drop Tim Laffey from centre before you would Dugan. But then regardless, Dugan's been playing right centre, which is where Ewan Aitken normally plays. So, unfortunately, it looks like Matt Duffy will probably get backdoored, or potentially they may try and use him off the bench. But Josh McCrone has also been named in the reserve. So if he gets the nod and comes in, because he's been fighting a bit of a groin niggle in recent weeks. So if he gets in, then you'd suspect Mann to go back to the bench. So it's sort of, it's a question of which way they will lean. And I think that decision will ultimately dictate the way that they play. So, some big fundamental calls coming up, but I guess you'd probably see Dugan getting the nod just based off reputation that he'll go back to one, and Duffy will miss out, and Ewan Aitken will play. There's no way that I could leave Ewan Aitken out. I know he's had an injury-ravaged year, but we see every time he comes back, they play phenomenal. In their massive win over the Manly side, he scored 2. So pretty much every game he's come back from, I think he's had a massive part in their wins. And to have him playing off the back of this forward pack, which has seen such success, they've got, I believe, Russell Packer is due to come back. That's at least what I've been reading. It doesn't look like he's actually been named here though, so looks like a late scratching. But outside of that, Paul Vaughan just keeps coming from strength to strength, and Joel Thompson, how many tries has he chalked up this year? It looks 8 tries in 20 starts. So that's pretty handy for a back row, So I think that combination that Mann and Widdop were able to generate so quickly, I think they'll be really hesitant to put McCrone in there, to be perfectly honest. So I wouldn't suspect anything would change at 6 and 7s, and I think most Dragons fans would be happy not to see any change. Where the game's going to be won and lost, I think is definitely going to be in the middle. You sort of discuss that from a pretty objective point of view, week in, week out, as any sort of footy analyst would. That the forwards are responsible for laying that platform early, getting good ruck speed, and then generating that time for your halves to give to those outside backs to seal the deal, or even pick off with your edge back rowers when you're stripping numbers coming into good ball. So despite recent form for the Broncos and some of the big scorelines that they've put on, I honestly believe that the Dragons can go with the Broncos. I'll be surprised if they do get flogged, just with the sheer intent that these Dragons forwards bring. When the outside backs are playing with confidence, and that is ultimately dictated around Widdop. When Widdop's free-flowing and confident, the forwards seem to just feed off that as well. And I can't wait to see the Sims brothers go at it. What better sort of story? Old brother versus younger brother. Tarek having played at the Broncos in the past. So the big plus, just looking at this too for the Dragons, they've got 40-point better differential than Panthers, Manly and Cowboys, which sit in front of them inside the top 8. So a win here really affects their confidence as far as not only just making the 8, but if they do happen to scrape into the 8, they're going to get pushed severely up if they manage to lock level on points at the end of the season. So massive opportunities. They get Penrith next week, who, depending on how they go against the Raiders, every game is so crucial for so many clubs moving in. There's so many good matchups, and that's why I'm so excited for this back end of the year, because there's going to be some teams that I think are going to be left heartbroken, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's teams that miss out on the 8 just due to for and against at all. So for me, look, I think the Broncos will get it done. They've got a pretty handy record up here at Suncorp against the Dragons. They've won 10 out of 17, but I think they'll do it in a little bit closer fashion, just because I really love what Gareth Widdop and Kurt Mann did, and I think that Hearts combination, especially the consistency of Cameron McInnes, he's played every single game for him, and I think moving forward, that consistency around their spine can definitely help to get them at least close to the Broncos. But I think the Broncos, just at the moment, brimming with confidence, a top 2 finish in sight, they'll really want to make sure that they go on and put a good performance on at home, because the more wins that they get now, it will ensure that they get another crack back at Suncorp come finals time. Knights vs Storm. A little bit up in the air in this one, and it sounds funny saying that, it's first versus last, but the reason I say that, we seen earlier in the week Craig Bellamy come out and said that there is potential for his stars to be rested, and we see there early on, we've got the Newcastle lineup on the screen at the moment. Nothing really changes there, everything's the same as the last 3 victories, so I'll move down to the Melbourne lineup and sort of explain myself. So we can see, you've obviously got your big 3 in Slater, Cronk and Smith, but even on the interchange bench, you've already got Jerome Hughes, who can play 1 and 6, and Slade Griffin, who's a 9, and then in your reserves, you've got Tohu Harris, who can play in the halves, but also Brodie Croft. So it wouldn't surprise me if we actually see Cooper Cronk rested, and you see Munster and Croft get the nod. Just because I think, the reason why I think that Croft would get the nod over Hughes, even though Hughes played 6 last week, I think Hughes and Munster are both runners of the ball, so I think they're a little bit too similar. Whereas, Crofty's going to go out there, he's a genuine half, and he's just got to contrast against Munster a little bit better. You can direct aside, I've already seen the likings that people have made to him and Cooper Cronk, and that would allow, if Billy Slater was to be rested as well, for Jerome Hughes to go to fullback. I highly doubt that they'd go Hughes and Croft in the halves and push Munster back there. I don't think they'd let that inexperience try and get them at 2 competition points, because, even though you're coming up against the team that's last, they'll still want to go out and make sure that they're pushing forward, keeping their momentum high. Tim Glasby isn't in the team, so Jordan McLean comes into the starting side. And, if those couple of players are stood down and rested, wouldn't surprise me if Tohu Harris comes onto the bench, or perhaps even steals the starting spot at the expense of Joe Stimson. But considering Joey won in the game last week, I'd probably say Tohu Harris will come off the bench. So yeah, some interesting decisions to be made for Bellamy, and I can definitely see why you'd want to rest those guys coming into this period of the year. So as it stands, the head-to-head stakes see the Newcastle Knights as $4.75 outsiders. So whether you wanted to have a bit of a look there and jump on early before these decisions are made, in the hope that the Storm does rest their players, and whether or not you actually think that Newcastle could still beat an understrength Melbourne side. I think just based off the confidence, they definitely could go out there and take advantage, just depending. But the fact that even now that Munster is back, even if they are without the big 3, I think he adds so much to their lineup, just his diversity, and he's got, similar high energy, hands on ball aspect that we see with Moylan moving into the 6 role. But on the other flip of the coin, if you think it'll just be a closer game, the Storm are as it stands at the minute, are paying $3.75 1-12. So, if you wanted to bank on a bit of value there, before that price, I would imagine would shorten up if those guys are rested. So yeah, normally a bit of a bogey team, I guess, over the course of history, at least in recent times, for the Storm. But the Melbourne side has had the better outcomes in the last 3 attempts. one of which we've seen earlier in the year. They won 40 points to 12. So, if it is all hands on deck, I'd expect to see a professional performance by Melbourne, and I think they would really go on with it. So if the big three are there, I'm tipping a big win. If they're not, I'm tipping a smaller win. So I still see a Melbourne win either way. You just question yourself week after week, who is going to go out there and beat them. My little running theory at the moment is if they do get a win this week, I think they'll be too good for Souths, even though Souths are running high. But if they are to win the next 2 games, which would take them to 6 in a row, they come up against the Raiders, which was a super physical game, super close game, 2014. And I actually think the Raiders could knock the Storm off and cause a bit of controversy. It wouldn't surprise me if the Raiders beat the Storm to make the 8. That's what I'm anticipating. That's what I'm excited about. This is these little plays that I hope sort of play out. I really hope the Raiders win the next 2, and that's what's on the line, because regardless, if the Storm win this week, they wrap up the minor premiership. So, they know that they're going to be there next week regardless, and it still might even be a case of even if the Raiders win, it might not be enough. So who knows what could happen. It's exciting stuff. I'm loving every minute of the NRL at the moment, as you can tell. But yeah, so for me, Melbourne, either way, 13 plus, 1 to 12 is dependent on who's in, who's out. So maybe just wait a little bit longer. What do we got there? That's the Saturday night game, the first one in the afternoon. So 3 o'clock kickoff. We'll know by Friday Arvo, so tomorrow Arvo, what the go is. Roosters Tigers. It's been one-way traffic for the Roosters against this club. They've won the last 9, and in those games they've scored 30 points in every one of those 9 victories. So, everything points to that happening again, especially based off team's form. I know that the Tigers did snatch that victory against Manly. Manly beat Roosters the week before, so you say, hey, maybe the Tigers are a chance here. And I think that'll be their thinking, but I think any time you sort of go down that path of, we beat them and they lost to them, so therefore that means that we're here, you're in a bit of trouble. And I think that's sort of where the Tigers season sort of sits at the moment. Big pluses for the Roosters. Michael Gordon is back, which sees Connor Watson unfortunately pushed back to the bench. They've named the centres in Ryan Madison and Mitch Orbison. And if I'm a Tigers coach, Cleary, that's sort of filling me with a bit of confidence. Ryan Madison has been a little bit sketchy at times in his defensive reads. And he's playing one more defensive position out, and they say that centre is actually the hardest position to defend. So he's been a bit hot and cold at times. Mitch Orbison, he's played enough centre there. I would like to see the split on back row and centre. He's definitely played a substantial amount there. Blake Ferguson will play despite that nasty sort of shoulder twinge. He fell from god-awful heights last week and landed right on the point of his shoulder, but seems to recover well enough. The fact that now Gordon, Friend and Corden are all back, I think are massive positives for the Roosters. And despite, going down in the last couple of weeks and to the Storm last week, it was pretty much discipline that let them down, and probably a little bit of complacency once they did hit the lead. And I don't think that they'll be in any sort of mood to muck around with the Tigers. So look for an 80-minute performance is what is going to be required of this Roosters team to really sort of stamp their authority. That, like we said, there's a lot on the line. If the Dragons happen to upset the Broncos, all of a sudden they're on their lonesome in second place. And, doesn't matter second or third, you're going to play each other, but that dictates where the game's going to be played. And I'd much rather be playing that game at Allianz rather than at Suncorp if I'm a Roosters player. Unfortunately, Joey Manu drops out of the 17, so it'll be interesting to see if there are any late changes there or if he will in fact be left out. But yeah, otherwise, we said Connor Watson, unfortunately, after what it would end up being 4 games at fullback, I thought he was really good. Yeah, he succumbed and headed back to the bench. Not too many changes for the Tigers. I believe the only one is Chris Lawrence is in and Josh Aloiai is out. So, as we said, Hassan Masters and Kevin Aguama have hardly been in bad nick over the last few weeks, and the inexperienced centre wing combos that are now present in the Roosters lineup, if the back rowers do their job and they got some experienced ones there in Chris Lawrence and Elijah Taylor, as I said, they're probably not going to set the world on fire in too many games, but they're certainly not going to go out of their way to lose you one either. So if they can get some sort of isolation there between Lawrence, Masters and Taylor and Aguama, they could pick off a try here and there that might keep them in the fight. But for me, I think that the halves in Pearce and Keary are just going to start to outclass Lola here and Brooks. Brooks was solid in the back end as far as his game management was concerned, and he was a big factor in why they went on to win. But I just think that, just the season that the Roosters are having, and the dominance that the forwards, especially in Napa and Maria Hargraves, I really think they can stick it to Woods and Grant in the first 25 minutes, and that might just about fucking do it for them. So I'm tipping the Roosters and tipping a big 13 plus. Cowboys Sharks, look, this could be another one. It could go either way. The Cowboys are super depleted. It's hats off to them for competing in the fashion that they have the last couple of weeks. Lachlan Coote is in some doubt with that ankle injury that he suffered last week. He still finished the game, but obviously Justin O'Neill out after that dislocated elbow. Sean Fensom with a MCL injury, I believe it was. One positive, we see Tamari Martin come back. Michael Morgan's been cleared after that nasty concussion, so at least, I guess, if Coote does see the field, and I suspect he will, he's a pretty fierce competitor, he's a tough guy, especially someone of his experience and knowing what's at stake here. The way I sort of position this game, realistically now, the Cowboys are just looking to finish in the top 8, whereas the Sharks still have a top 4 finish at their disposal. So if the Cowboys win this game, I believe they can finish in the top 8. And if the Sharks win this game, I think they'll finish in the top 4. So the loser, I think they'll fail to achieve their goal. So if the Sharks lose, they won't finish the top 4. If the Cowboys lose, they won't finish top 8. So pretty crucial. There's still a couple weeks to go, and that's, if that does happen, doesn't mean I'm right. We see Javid Bowen pushed into the centres due to O'Neill being ruled out, and Kalen Ponga comes in for, he's only had a handful of games this year. He had a few at the start and has been left out ever since. So it'll be interesting, seeing him come in off the wing and what involvements he has, pushing around the footy. It'll be interesting to see any sort of inside-outside plays that they get going with Morgan or Tamari Martin. I think having Ben Hampton again will just help steady that ship and let Jake Granville go super hard for what and basically just get done what he needs to get done. No Jack Bird still for the Sharks, so we sort of scroll down to their lineup. Jaden Brayley's been named an extended bench. It's like we said last week, it was an interesting decision that Flanagan's going to have to make. Does he stay with the combo that he's been working with? But I thought what Brayley had done earlier in the season definitely warranted him coming back into the side. Flanagan said in a press conference earlier that he's an outside chance, and that if he doesn't play this week, it'll definitely be next week. Who would I prefer? I think Seguiaro, just with the flair that he brings off, and knowing that he's a Townsville boy, he's not going to shy away from a contest, especially playing in front of his home fans, and even any sort of Cowboys supporter out there, me being one, I'd be out there cheering him on and wishing him every success. So, but not too much. I think, despite the brave and stout performances that Moo Brown has put on, especially during that Origin period when he was playing in the halves with Chad Townsend, I think I'd probably have to leave him out of the side. So yeah, all things aside, I think it's just going to be a matter of, can the Cowboys hold on? I think they'll give it a fair shake again. I was super impressed with Patrick Margot off the bench last week. I thought he had some really strong carries. If Corey Jensen can just get the lazy penalty out of his game, I think he'll definitely help add some oomph to the forward pack, especially in the last 20. It's essentially where the Cowboys have just struggled. Probably not even the last 20, probably just the last 15 in the last 2 or 3 weeks. They've lost the last 3. The Sharkies have lost their last 2 now, I believe it is. So yeah, it's a real crossroads for both of these sides, and super vital. If the Cowboys can manage to pull off a victory here, I think it'll do a heap in the way of morale, They got the Tigers and the Broncos in their run home after this, so depending on what sort of form we see continue from the West Tigers, you just don't know what could happen in the weeks to come as far as the Cowboys are concerned. But for me, I think the Sharks, they'll just have a little bit too much come that last little bit, basically just due to the inexperience of that bench. I know Ben Hampton's been on the scene for a while now, but he's never really established himself as a starting player. And Margot Jensen and Hall, they're all sort of new to the NRL scene, and that in effect is going to force that starting 13 to play maximum minutes. I think that's going to come to bite him in the arse come that last 20 minutes. So yeah, I think it'll still be close, but yeah, for me, Sharkies 1-12. Alrighty, Raiders Panthers. Look, this for me is the game of the round. I'm frothing for this one. I cannot wait. We've seen the two sides come together in Country Week in Bathurst earlier in the season, and it was the Penrith side who sort of stole the victory late in the game with two late tries and ended up winning 24-20. No surprises in the Raiders lineup, unchanged due to their recent run of good form. So they're three wins in a row now, but Penrith are 6 wins in a row. For me, 6 in a row. Generally, you've starting to push your ledger of when maths just has to sort of take its stance and you're sort of just due to lose a game. And I think for Penrith, it might be this week. They've only won one of their last 5 starts in Canberra. And for that reason, I think there's just something that's got to give. They haven't been super convincing the last 2 weeks. Really struggled to put away a depleted Cowboys team last week, and were super late in putting away the Tigers the week before that. Not to take away anything from the performances of some of these young kids, because it is a team full of rookies, but in saying that, it does have a whole heap of experienced forwards as well, so it's a good contrast. But they'll miss a lot through Peter Wallace. But in saying that, it looks Trent Merritt's been named 18th man, so as long as he's fit, I'd say he'll get the nod, probably over Tim Grant. And Peter Wallace is out. He's had to have some minor hand surgery after last week, which shouldn't see him out for too long. So they've gone with Sione Katoa to start at 9. So big raps on the young kid. He's definitely sort of fought for his spot. Tyron May holds his position on the bench. I thought they might have brought the experienced Mitch Rain into the side. Definitely thought he did a bang-up job whilst Wallace was injured. But they've elected to go with the younger kids, whether they feel that there's a better combination with some of the youth that is in the side, as opposed to Mitch Rain, or whether he hasn't perhaps been performing the last few weeks in New South Wales Cup. I'm unaware of. I don't get to see too many games in the New South Wales Cup, being up here in Queensland. But yeah, still a solid bench. To have Cartwright and Fisher Harris come off the bench, and now Campbell Gillard, undeniable after his performance last week, has worked his way back into the starting side. But I wasn't too disliking of that ploy to sort of let the first 15-20 minutes of the game go out and then just let him go wild. I think it was a good ploy, much like they do at Parramatta with Matangi and Alvaro. I think they're great off the bench. So be interesting if Merrin does get a start, whether they don't just play Merrin in the front row and bring Campbell Gillard back to the bench. So yeah, a few little decisions there for Anthony Griffin, but I just think the execution of the outside backs, the combination that Kotrick and Croker have had this year, it was all Leilua and Rapana last year, and not that they've disappointed, but I think it's pretty fair to say that they haven't been in as good a form as they were last year. Still 27 tries between them, and 23 between Kotrick and Croker, but I think just the execution and solidity is probably more in defence for Kotrick and Croker. And Blake Austin's full of running at the moment, so as long as they can stabilise that, and Hodgson just gets that little 5th tackle option right. He's been guilty of kicking that ball dead and giving away a 7 tackle set, and you don't want to be giving the Panthers any more ball than's necessary. So expect a super close encounter again. I don't think there'll be too much between them, especially because so much is at stake. But for me, I think the Raiders 1-12. Doggies Manly. Oh man, this could really be really be ugly if Manly wants to get back in their winning ways. We've seen what they did to the Roosters only a fortnight ago. Unfortunately, they completely switched off against a Tiger side last week, which they well and truly should have gone on. They led 20 points to 4 and just capitulated. But we only have to look at this Canterbury side now, in a side that's been underperforming, and then now without Josh Reynolds and Sam Cassiano. For some reason, they've opted with Michael Leisha off the bench. I don't know what the fuck he brings you that you need so desperately to name him in a 17. Unless there's going to be some change where Mbai goes back to the halves and Chase Stanley moves back into the outside backs at the dispense of one of either, I think Brenko Lee's actually been probably one of their better players in the last couple of weeks. And Montoya sort of made a stay, so I'm not sure who would miss out if that is the case. But yeah, there's no way I'd be bringing Leisha into the side. I'd probably, if anything, they just need to try and handle this Manly forward pack early on. And I really liked what Andy Sorden has brought on debut. It was a while ago now, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I just wouldn't have Leisha there. The only change for Manly, fortunately, Brad Parker, the kid who made the error that led to the match-winning try for Malachi Watene-Zelezniak in the Tigers outfit last week. Brian Kelly comes back into the side. Other than that, they're pretty well the exact same side. So, up front you got Brenton Lawrence and Tapau if they can lay the platform early and take it to Tom and Graham and Clemmer. I'm always excited to see Tapau and Clemmer go at it. It's always a good little battle. But yeah, you've always got to be wary of the finishing capabilities now of Trbojevic and Ioane, and just the combination that even the Trbojevic brothers have with each other in and around the ruck. It's nothing short of entertaining. And what do you say? The Dogs have been, even though they're not last on the ladder, I think it's fair to say that they've easily been the worst team this year to watch in the NRL. They're thoroughly unentertaining. I don't know what answers you have moving forward as in club administration and how you change that. Especially now you're going to be losing Reynolds, who's been so good for you over a number of years, and now he's moving on. I'm not sure where it happens. Moses Mbai hasn't really lived up to his standard, and was considered a half, and he's even been tossed up by Kevin Walters to be on an Origin radar, but he's not even playing in the halves now. He's playing dummy half. So yeah, I'm not sure what happens moving forward. I think the recruitment structure of the Dogs has to come under severe questioning. I just don't think it's going to end very, very prettily for Manly, for the Bulldogs. Sorry, Trbojevic to score, Manly 13 plus, paying $13.20, $3.20. So couple that into a multi versus the Souths. Alex Johnson 13 plus. Who knows? You might end up with a cheeky little payday there, but yeah, for me, I don't think it's going to end too well. So that brings us to the end of round 24 preview. We shall see in the not too distant future how well my predictions fare and where everyone ends up in that top 4, top 8 after this week as we get closer and closer. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that Raiders-Penrith game. I think it should be an absolute clanger. So yeah, enjoy your footy. Best of luck with your tips. Best of luck with your team. And I shall see you at the start of next week. Alright guys, catch us.